The palace radio crackled to life at 3:47 p.m. A guard's panicked voice broke through the static. "Sir, the garden gate was left unsecured for 7 minutes. I cannot locate the young prince." Prince William's face went pale. His son had been playing in the private gardens just moments ago. Now, in the heart of London, with thousands of tourists outside the palace walls, his child was missing. William's hands trembled as he grabbed his security chief by the collar. Find him. Find him now. What happened in those 7 minutes would change royal security protocol forever. This is the true story of the day. Kensington Palace went into complete lockdown. The spring afternoon at Kensington Palace had started like any other Tuesday. The sun filtered through the ancient oak trees that surrounded the private gardens, casting dancing shadows on the perfectly manicured lawns. Prince William had finished his morning meetings and decided to spend quality time with his young son in the secure palace grounds. The boy, full of energy and curiosity, had begged his father to let him explore the garden maze while William took an important phone call from his private secretary, Catherine. The Princess of Wales was away attending a charity function in Manchester. She had kissed her son goodbye that morning, reminding him to listen to his father and stay within the designated play areas. The child had nodded enthusiastically, already thinking about the adventures he would have in the garden. He loved the tall hedges, the hidden benches, and the small fountain where birds came to drink. William watched his son run toward the maze entrance, small legs pumping with excitement. The prince smiled, remembering his own childhood adventures in these very gardens. He had played here with his brother Harry, creating imaginary kingdoms and fighting invisible dragons. The gardens had always been a sanctuary, a place where royal children could simply be children. Away from cameras and public scrutiny, the security detail that day consisted of 8 experienced protection officers. James Richardson, the lead guard, had been with the royal family for 12 years. He was a former military man, trained in counterterrorism and emergency response. His team was positioned strategically around the garden perimeter. 2 guards stood at the main entrance, 2 more patrolled the outer walls, and the rest monitored various access points. The system had worked flawlessly for decades. At 3:30 p.m., Richardson received a radio call from the palace kitchen. There had been a delivery mix-up, and the head chef needed someone to verify a shipment at the service entrance. It was a routine matter, the kind of small disruption that happened daily in a working royal residence. Richardson made a decision that would haunt him for the rest of his life. He assigned Officer Marcus Cole, who was stationed at the Eastern Garden Gate, to handle the kitchen issue. Cole was young, just 26, but he had excellent credentials. He had served in the Royal Marines and had passed all his security clearances with flying colors. He was eager to prove himself, always volunteering for extra duties. When Richardson called him, Cole immediately responded. He glanced at the eastern gate, which was locked from the inside. The gate led to a small service path used by gardeners. It was rarely opened, and when it was, there was always a strict protocol. 2 guards had to be present, and the security cameras had to be active. Cole jogged toward the palace kitchen, his mind already on the delivery problem. In his haste, he forgot one crucial thing. He forgot to radio for a replacement at the eastern gate. He forgot that protocol required the gate to be monitored at all times when the royal family was on the grounds. He simply left his post, assuming he would be back in a few minutes. Meanwhile, William had moved to a stone bench near the rose garden, still on his phone call. His secretary was discussing upcoming engagements, security arrangements for an overseas trip, and various family matters that required the prince's attention. William could see the entrance to the maze from where he sat. He assumed his son was happily exploring the winding paths between the tall hedges. The boy knew the maze well. He had walked it dozens of times with his parents and nanny inside the maze. The young prince was indeed having a wonderful time. He pretended he was a knight searching for treasure. He touched the hedge walls as he walked, feeling the smooth leaves under his small fingers. He reached the center of the maze, where a small stone statue of a lion stood guard over a circular clearing. The boy sat on the lion's base, catching his breath. From his position, could hear birds singing and the distant sound of London traffic beyond the palace walls. Then he heard something else. A scraping sound. Metal against stone. The boy's curiosity overtook his caution. He stood up and moved toward the sound. It was coming from somewhere beyond the maze, near the eastern side of the garden. He had been told never to go near the walls, but the sound was so interesting. Maybe it was a gardener with a new tool. Maybe it was something exciting. The child left the maze and walked across the lawn toward the eastern section. There were fewer flowers here, and the trees grew closer together. The ground sloped slightly downward. He pushed through a gap between two rhododendron bushes and found himself in a narrow area he had never explored before. The high stone wall of the palace grounds rose before him, covered in ivy, and there, just ahead, was the eastern gate. It stood slightly ajar. The lock was disengaged. The gate moved slowly in the spring breeze, creating that scraping sound the boy had heard. To a 4-year-old mind, an open gate was an invitation. He had never been allowed beyond the palace walls without his parents. What was out there? What could he see? Back at the kitchen, Officer Cole was dealing with an increasingly complicated situation. The delivery had the wrong documentation. The chef was insisting the order was correct. The delivery driver was becoming argumentative. Cole pulled out his phone to call the supplier directly. 5 minutes had passed since he left the eastern gate. He did not realize that the gate's lock, which had been showing signs of wear for weeks, had finally malfunctioned. The maintenance request had been filed but not yet addressed. The gate, unsecured and unmonitored, had drifted open. William ended his phone call and stood up from the bench. He stretched and called out to his son. "Time to come in. We need to wash up for tea." There was no response. William smiled. The boy was probably hiding, turning the end of playtime into a game. William walked toward the maze entrance, expecting to hear giggles or the sound of small feet running. "I'm coming to find you," he called out in a playful voice. He entered the maze, following the familiar path to the center. The lion statue stood alone. No child was sitting on it. No child was hiding behind it. William's smile faded slightly. "This isn't funny anymore. Come out, please." His voice was firmer now. Still nothing. William's pace quickened as he checked every turn in the maze. His son was not there. The prince emerged from the maze and looked across the gardens. His son was not on the lawn. Not by the fountain. Not near the rose beds. William's heart began to beat faster. He pulled out his radio and called Richardson. "James, where's my son? Can you see him on the cameras?" Richardson, who had been reviewing paperwork in the security office, immediately switched to the garden camera feeds. He scanned each monitor, his trained eyes searching for the small figure in the blue jumper. "Sir, I'm checking now. Give me a moment." His voice was calm, but his hands moved quickly across the controls. William was already walking faster, calling his son's name louder. The other guards heard the prince's voice in the radio transmission. They converged on the garden, each one searching their assigned areas. Richardson continued scanning the cameras, switching between angles, rewinding footage. Then he saw it. Timestamp, 3:35 p.m. A small figure leaving the maze. Walking toward the eastern section. Disappearing behind the rhododendron bushes, Richardson switched to the eastern gate camera. His blood turned cold. The camera showed the gate standing open. He rewound further. At 3:33 p.m., the gate had been closed. At 3:34 p.m., it had started to drift open. At 3:36 p.m., a small child appeared on camera approaching the gate. At 3:37 p.m., the child stepped through the gate and disappeared from view. Richardson grabbed his main radio. His voice was no longer calm. "All units code red. The young prince has exited through the eastern gate. Gate was unsecured. I repeat, the child has left the secured area. Time of exit, approximately 9 minutes ago." He then radioed William directly. His words were the ones that would echo in William's nightmares for years to come. "Sir, the garden gate was left unsecured. Your son went through it. He's outside the palace grounds." William felt the world tilt beneath his feet. Outside the grounds, in London, alone. His 4-year-old son was somewhere in the city, unsupervised, unprotected. The prince ran toward the eastern gate, his security training warring with his paternal panic. Richardson's voice continued over the radio, coordinating the response, calling for backup, alerting the Metropolitan Police. William reached the gate and burst through it. The service path beyond was empty. It led to a small street that ran behind the palace, normally used for deliveries and maintenance vehicles. William looked left and right. There were parked vans, bins, a few pedestrians in the distance. No sign of his son. Where is he? William shouted into his radio, his voice breaking. Where is the prince? Richardson was already moving before William finished shouting. He burst from the security office, his phone pressed to his ear, coordinating with the Metropolitan Police Command Center. Every second counted. A child alone in London could disappear into crowds, wander into traffic, or worse. Richardson had trained for hostage situations, terrorist attacks, and security breaches. But nothing had prepared him for the raw terror in Prince William's voice. The palace went into immediate lockdown. Every entrance was sealed. Guards rushed to their emergency positions. Within 90 seconds, 6 police vehicles were screaming toward Kensington Palace from different directions. Richardson reached the eastern gate, breathing hard, and found William standing in the service lane, his face drained of color. The prince was turning in circles, his hands pressed against his head, trying to think clearly through the panic. "Sir, we need to establish a search perimeter immediately," Richardson said, forcing his voice to remain steady. "The Metropolitan Police are coordinating a grid search. We have helicopters en route. We will find him." Even as he spoke, Richardson was calculating the terrible mathematics of a missing child. 9 minutes was an eternity. A 4-year-old could walk several hundred meters in that time. If someone had taken him, a car could have covered miles. William grabbed Richardson's jacket, pulling him close. The usual formality between prince and protection officer evaporated. "My son is out there, James. My baby is out there somewhere, and I let this happen. I was right there. I was supposed to be watching him." William's voice cracked. His eyes were wild with fear. "Catherine trusted me. She trusted me to keep him safe." Richardson had never seen the prince like this. William was always composed, always in control, the perfect balance of royal dignity and modern approachability. Now he looked like any father whose child had vanished. "Sir, we will find him. I give you my word. But I need you to focus. Did your son say anything about wanting to explore? Did he mention anything he saw outside the garden? Any detail could help." William forced himself to breathe. He was a search and rescue pilot. He had trained with mountain rescue teams. He knew that panic killed. He knew that clear thinking saved lives. He closed his eyes for 3 seconds, forcing his mind to work. He likes construction equipment. Last week he saw a digger working on the road outside. He asked questions about it. He wanted to see it up close. Richardson immediately radioed this information to the search teams. "Subject is attracted to construction vehicles and heavy machinery. Check all nearby work sites." He turned back to William. "Sir, we need you to return to the palace. If anyone has taken him, we may receive a ransom call. You need to be at a secure location." "I'm not going anywhere," William said flatly. "I'm searching for my son." There was no room for argument in his voice. Richardson recognized the futility of pushing back. Instead, he nodded and handed William a radio. "Then you stay with me. We work as a team." Officer Marcus Cole came running up the service lane, his face white with horror. He had been in the kitchen when the code red came through. He had immediately realized what he had done. "Sir, I'm so sorry. I left the gate. I didn't call for backup. This is my fault. This is all my fault." His voice was shaking. He looked like he might vomit. William turned to face the young officer. For a moment, Richardson thought the prince might strike him. William's hands clenched into fists. His jaw was tight. But then something shifted in his expression. He took a breath and spoke with cold precision. "We will deal with what happened later. Right now, You're going to help us find him. You know this area? Where would a small child go? Cole nodded, wiping his eyes. There's a small park 2 streets over. Children often play there. And there's ongoing construction on Kensington High Street, about 400 meters north. They're installing new water mains. The 3 men started moving immediately. With other security officers fanning out in different directions, the Metropolitan Police had already begun stopping traffic and questioning pedestrians. Detective Inspector Sarah Chen was the senior officer coordinating the ground search. She'd been having coffee when the alert came through. A missing royal child. Every law enforcement officer's worst nightmare. She arrived at the scene within minutes, establishing a command post in an empty shop unit near the palace. Chen had handled dozens of missing child cases. She knew the statistics. Most children were found within an hour, usually close to where they disappeared. But every minute that passed reduced the probability of a safe recovery. She deployed officers in expanding circles from the eastern gate, each team equipped with photographs of the young prince. The photos showed a smiling boy with light brown hair and bright blue eyes, wearing a blue jumper and dark trousers. Inside Kensington Palace, the private secretary was making the most difficult phone call of her career. She reached the Princess of Wales, who was touring a children's hospital in Manchester. "Ma'am, I need you to remain calm. There's been a security incident. Your son wandered through an unsecured gate. He's outside the palace grounds. Prince William and the police are searching for him now." Catherine felt her legs weaken. She gripped the edge of a desk to steady herself. "What do you mean he's outside? Where's William? Is anyone with my son?" Her voice was rising despite her efforts to control it. The hospital staff around her noticed the change in her demeanor and began to back away, sensing something terrible had happened. "Ma'am, we don't know where he is at this moment. That's why we're calling. We have every available resource searching. The Metropolitan Police have locked down the area. We'll find him." The private secretary was choosing her words carefully, trying to convey urgency without causing complete panic. "I'm coming back now. Get me a helicopter. I need to be there." Catherine was already moving toward the exit, her protection officers hurrying to keep up with her. The carefully planned hospital visit was abandoned. Staff watched in confusion as the princess rushed out, her face ashen. Her usual composure shattered. Back on the streets near Kensington, William was moving methodically through the search grid. He showed the photo on his phone to every person he encountered. An elderly woman walking her dog, a delivery driver unloading packages, a group of teenagers waiting at a bus stop. "Have you seen this boy? He's 4 years old. He's wearing blue. Please, have you seen him?" Most people shook their heads, apologetic and concerned. But then William showed the photo to a postman named David Coomer, who was finishing his route. Coomer looked at the image and his eyes widened. "Wait, yes. Yes, I saw a little boy matching this description. Maybe 10 minutes ago? He was walking by himself on Crawford Street. I thought it was strange. A child that young alone, but I see lots of children. I didn't think to stop him. I just thought his parents must be nearby. Which direction was he heading?" William demanded, hope and fear surging through him simultaneously. Kumar pointed north. Toward the high street? Toward the construction site. William was already running, Richardson and Cole sprinting behind him. Richardson radioed the information to all teams. Subject spotted on Crawford Street. Heading north toward construction site on Kensington High Street, approximately 10 minutes ago. Detective Inspector Chen redirected her teams immediately. The construction site was a dangerous place for a small child. Heavy machinery, open trenches, building materials stacked precariously. She radioed ahead to the site manager. "This is Metropolitan Police. Evacuate your workers and shut down all machinery immediately. We have a missing child who may have entered your site." The construction site manager, a man named Robert Sullivan, received the call with disbelief. A royal child. On his building site. He hit the emergency stop button, and the roar of machinery ground to a halt. Workers looked around in confusion as Sullivan grabbed a megaphone. "Everyone, stop what you're doing. We're searching for a lost child. 4 years old, wearing blue. Check every corner, every piece of equipment, every trench. Move now. William arrived at the construction site fence. His heart was pounding so hard he could barely breathe. The site was vast, full of partially demolished buildings, stacks of pipes, mountains of dirt and rubble. A maze of potential hiding places. A minefield of potential dangers. He climbed over the fence without hesitation. Ignoring the security sign warning of unauthorized access, Richardson was right behind him, coordinating with the construction workers who were now spreading out across the site. 20 men in hard hats and high-visibility vests, calling out for a child. The police arrived moments later, adding their numbers to the search. Detective Inspector Chen established a systematic search pattern, ensuring no area was missed. William moved through the rubble, calling his son's name over and over. His throat was raw. His hands were scraped from climbing over obstacles. None of it mattered. He checked behind stacks of bricks, inside empty cement mixers, under parked vehicles. Every second without finding his son felt like a small death. He thought about Catherine racing back from Manchester. He thought about having to tell her that he had failed to protect their child. He thought about his own mother, who had spent so much of her life trying to give her sons normal childhoods, despite the constraints of royal life. Over here, the shout came from the far side of the construction site. A worker had found something. William ran toward the voice, his heart in his throat. He rounded a pile of scaffolding and saw a cluster of workers gathered around a small, portable office that had been converted into a break room. William pushed through them and saw his son. The boy was sitting at a small table inside the break room, completely unharmed, eating a chocolate biscuit. A construction worker, a middle-aged woman named Patricia Morris, was sitting with him, keeping him calm. She looked up as William burst through the door. "Is this your son?" "He wandered in about 5 minutes ago. He seemed lost, so I gave him a biscuit and was about to call for help." William dropped to his knees and pulled his son into his arms. The boy, startled by his father's intensity, started to cry. "Daddy, you're holding me too tight." William loosened his grip but couldn't let go. Tears were streaming down his face. He pressed his forehead against his son's head, breathing in the familiar smell of his hair, feeling the solid reality of his small body. "I'm sorry, I'm so sorry," William whispered. "Are you okay? Are you hurt anywhere?" He was running his hands over his son, checking for injuries, unable to believe the boy was really safe. The child, confused by all the fuss, shook his head. "I'm okay, Daddy. I wanted to see the big digger. I saw it from the garden, and the gate was open, so I went to look. But I couldn't find it. Then I got tired, and the nice lady gave me a biscuit." Richardson appeared in the doorway, relief flooding his features. He immediately radioed the command post. "We have him. The prince is safe. Repeat, the child has been found safe and unharmed." The radio exploded with responses. Officers cheering. Chen confirming. Other teams standing down from the search. William carried his son out of the construction site, refusing to put him down. The boy wrapped his small arms around his father's neck, finally sensing that something serious had happened. Workers and police officers lined the pathway, watching the prince walk past with his child. Patricia Morris, the construction worker who had kept the boy safe, stood near the exit. William stopped in front of her, his eyes still red from crying. "Thank you," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You kept him safe. You gave him comfort when he was lost. I can never repay that kindness." Patricia smiled gently, her own eyes moist. "He's a brave little lad. He was never scared, just curious." "You have a good boy there," William nodded, unable to speak further without breaking down again. Richardson stepped forward and took Patricia's details, explaining that the palace would be in touch. The journey back to Kensington Palace took less than 5 minutes. But for William, it felt like an eternity. He sat in the back of a police vehicle, still holding his son, still checking him over and over to make sure he was really unharmed. The boy had started to chatter about the construction site, excited to tell his father about all the equipment he had seen. William listened, responding in automatic murmurs, his mind still processing what had almost happened. Detective Inspector Chen walked alongside the vehicle, coordinating the final stages of the operation. The street lockdown would remain in place until the prince was safely back inside the palace walls. She had already begun the process of reviewing everything that had gone wrong. The gate malfunction, the missing guard, the 9-minute gap in coverage. Her report would be scathing. Changes would have to be made immediately. Back at the palace, Private Secretary had been keeping the Princess of Wales updated minute by minute during her helicopter flight from Manchester. When the news came through that the child had been found safe, Catherine broke down completely. Her protection officer had to take the phone from her shaking hands. She sat in the helicopter, sobbing with relief. Her careful public composure finally shattered. The pilot adjusted course to land at Kensington Palace instead of Windsor, where they had originally planned to refuel. As William walked through the eastern gate back into the palace gardens, he felt a wave of emotions crash over him. Relief, gratitude, anger, shame. His son was safe in his arms, but the terror of those minutes would never leave him. He had felt utterly helpless. He had failed in the most basic duty of a parent, keeping his child safe. The fact that his son had been found unharmed didn't erase the reality of what could have happened. Richardson stood at the gate, watching the prince pass. His face was drawn. He had aged years in the past hour. He knew what was coming. An investigation. Questions about protocols. Possible dismissal. His 12-year career with the royal family was probably over. But more than his career, Richardson was thinking about the trust that had been broken. He had been responsible for the safety of the royal family, and he had failed. Officer Marcus Cole stood further back, barely visible in the shadows of the garden wall. He looked destroyed. Other security officers avoided eye contact with him. Everyone knew what he had done. He had abandoned his post. A child had nearly been lost because of his mistake. No one had spoken to him directly since William had told him to help with the search. But Cole could feel the judgment radiating from his colleagues. His career in royal protection was finished. He knew it. Everyone knew it. Inside the palace, staff had gathered in worried clusters, waiting for news. When word spread that the young prince had been found, there were tears of relief. The housekeeper who had watched the boy grow since he was a baby sat down heavily in a chair, pressing her hand to her chest. The head chef, who had inadvertently caused Cole to leave his post, looked stricken with guilt. Everyone connected to the palace felt the weight of what had happened. William carried his son directly to the private family rooms. He drew a bath, helping the boy out of his dusty clothes, checking once more for any scratches or bruises. The child was completely unharmed, still chattering happily about his adventure. To him it had been exciting, not dangerous. He didn't understand why his father was so quiet, why there were tears running down William's face as he gently washed his son's hair. "Daddy, why are you sad?" the boy asked, touching his father's cheek with a wet hand. William tried to smile. "I'm not sad. I'm happy. I'm so happy you're safe. But you must never, ever leave the garden without me or Mummy again. Do you understand? It's very important." The child nodded solemnly, sensing this was serious. "I promise." "Daddy, I'm sorry I made you worried." Catherine's helicopter touched down on the palace grounds at 5:15 p.m. She was out of the aircraft before the rotors had fully stopped spinning. Running across the lawn toward the palace entrance, staff directed her to the family rooms. She burst through the door and found William sitting on the bathroom floor with their son, who was now wrapped in a towel and playing with toy boats. Catherine dropped to her knees and gathered both of them into her arms. For several minutes, none of them spoke. They just held each other, a family reunited after coming terrifyingly close to tragedy. Catherine kissed her son's head over and over, breathing him in, assuring herself he was real and safe. William leaned against his wife, feeling the strength drain from his body now that she was there to share the burden. The boy, confused but pleased by all the attention, continued playing with his boats, making quiet splashing sounds. Eventually, Catherine looked at William. Her eyes were questioning, demanding answers. William told her everything. The phone call. The open gate. The 9 minutes of not knowing. The search. finding their son eating a biscuit in a construction site break room. Catherine listened, her face cycling through shock, fear, anger, and finally settling on exhausted relief. 9 minutes, she whispered. He was alone in London for 9 minutes. I know, William said quietly. I know. I should have been watching more carefully. I should have checked where he was. I was too confident. I thought the security was enough. Catherine shook her head. This wasn't your fault. The gate should never have been unsecured. There should never have been a gap in coverage. Someone failed at their job, and our son almost paid the price. Downstairs in the security office, Richardson was already compiling his incident report. Every detail had to be documented. The timeline, the radio communications, the search pattern. The outcome? He wrote with mechanical precision, his emotions locked away for now. He would have time to process his feelings later. Right now, he owed the prince and princess a complete accounting of what had gone wrong. At 6 p.m., the palace issued a brief statement to the press office, explaining that there had been a minor security incident, but that the family was safe and the matter was being handled internally. No details were provided about what had actually happened. The press office staff worked to contain any rumors, knowing that if the full story leaked, it would be front-page news around the world. A missing royal child, even for 9 minutes, would cause international panic. The Metropolitan Police conducted their own review. Detective Inspector Chen spent 2 hours interviewing everyone involved, from the construction workers to the postman who had seen the child. Her report would recommend changes to how the police coordinated with royal protection officers. The 9-minute delay in the initial response had been too long. Better communication systems were needed. By evening, the palace had returned to a semblance of normalcy. The young prince had eaten his dinner and was now in his pajamas, ready for bed. William read him 3 stories instead of the usual one, unable to let his son out of his sight. The boy's eyes grew heavy, his small hand holding his father's finger. When he finally fell asleep, William sat watching him for another hour, listening to his breathing, marveling at how peaceful children could be, even after experiencing something that had terrified every adult around them. Catherine sat beside William in the darkened nursery. They had talked for hours, processing what had happened, making decisions about what came next. Security protocols would be reviewed immediately. The eastern gate would be permanently locked unless explicitly opened by 2 senior officers. Camera coverage would be expanded. New procedures would be implemented for any situation that required a guard to leave their post. But beyond the practical changes, there were deeper conversations to be had. William and Catherine had always tried to give their children as normal a life as possible within the constraints of being royal. They wanted them to play freely, explore, learn independence. But today had shown the terrifying reality that their children were always at risk. The world was fascinated by them, and that fascination could turn dangerous. We can't keep them in a bubble, Catherine said quietly, voicing what they were both thinking. But we also can't pretend they're like other children. They're not. They're targets. They're vulnerable in ways other children aren't. William nodded slowly. I know, but I don't want them to grow up afraid. I don't want them to live behind walls and barriers, never experiencing real life. It was an impossible balance, one that William's parents and grandparents had struggled with for generations. How do you raise children to be independent and confident while keeping them safe from threats both real and imagined? How do you give them a childhood when their very existence makes them valuable targets for criminals, extremists, and obsessed members of the public? We'll figure it out, Catherine said finally. We'll make changes. We'll be more careful. But we won't let fear rule our lives. We won't let this change who we are as a family. William took her hand, grateful for her strength. She had every right to be furious with him, to blame him for not watching their son carefully enough. Instead, she was focusing on moving forward, on learning from what had happened. The next morning, William requested meetings with Richardson and Cole. He needed to address what had happened, to make decisions about their futures. Richardson arrived first, standing at attention in William's private office, prepared for whatever judgment was coming. William studied the man who had protected his family for 12 years. James, what happened yesterday was unacceptable, William began. Richardson nodded. Yes, sir. I take full responsibility. I assigned Officer Cole to a task without ensuring proper replacement coverage. The gate malfunction should have been addressed weeks ago, when maintenance first reported the issue. I failed in my duty. William was silent for a moment, thinking about his own failures that day. You've kept my family safe for 12 years. You've prevented incidents I'm probably not even aware of. You're one of the best protection officers in the country. Yesterday, you made a mistake. A serious mistake. But it was a mistake compounded by a faulty gate, a routine kitchen problem, and my own failure to keep proper watch on my son. Richardson looked surprised. He had expected immediate dismissal. William continued, his voice measured. I'm not firing you, James, but things have to change. You'll work with the Metropolitan Police to implement new protocols. Every gate, every door, every access point will have redundant coverage. If someone needs to leave their post, there must be an automatic system for replacement. No exceptions. This can never happen again. I understand, sir. Thank you for the second chance. I won't let you down. Richardson's voice was rough with emotion. He had spent the entire night convinced his career was over, preparing himself to lose the job that had defined his adult life. William's decision was both a relief and a heavy responsibility. He would spend the rest of his career making sure nothing like this ever happened again. Officer Marcus Cole was summoned next. He entered William's office, looking like he hadn't slept. His eyes were hollow, his shoulders slumped. He stood before the prince, unable to meet his eyes. William studied the young man, remembering his own mistakes, his own failures of judgment over the years. Officer Cole, what you did was inexcusable. You abandoned your post without following protocol. A child was put at risk because of your actions. Cole nodded miserably. Yes, sir. I have no excuse. I was trying to help with the kitchen problem and I forgot my primary duty. I forgot that nothing is more important than keeping the family safe. I failed you, and I failed your son. I'll submit my resignation immediately. William leaned back in his chair, considering. Catherine had given him her thoughts on this decision. She had been less forgiving than William initially, but after reflection, she had agreed with his approach. You made a terrible mistake, one that could have had devastating consequences. But you're 26 years old, and you've been in this job for less than 2 years. You haven't learned yet that royal protection isn't about being helpful or eager. It's about following protocols absolutely, even when they seem unnecessary. Cole looked up, confused about where this was going. William continued, I'm not accepting your resignation, but you're being transferred out of royal protection. You'll return to standard Metropolitan Police duties. You need more experience, more seasoning. Maybe someday, if you prove yourself, you can apply again. But right now, you're not ready for this responsibility. It was a punishment, but not the career-ending disaster Cole had expected. He would lose his prestigious position, but he would still have a job in law enforcement. He nodded slowly, accepting the judgment. Thank you, sir. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for what I put your family through. William stood, indicating the meeting was over. We all make mistakes, Officer Cole. The question is whether we learn from them. I hope you do. After Cole left, William sat alone in his office for a long time. He had handled the formal aspects of the incident. Decisions had been made. Changes would be implemented. But the emotional aftermath was far from over. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw that open gate. He heard his own voice shouting, "Where is the prince?" He felt the terror of those 9 minutes, not knowing if his son was hurt, lost, or taken. The psychological impact on the family would take time to process. William found himself checking on his children more frequently, waking at night to make sure they were safe in their beds. Catherine became more cautious about their outdoor activities, double-checking security arrangements before agreeing to any event. The young prince himself seemed largely unaffected, but his parents noticed he stayed closer to them in public spaces now, less eager to explore on his own. The palace security review took 3 weeks to complete. The findings were comprehensive and sobering. The eastern gate lock had been deteriorating for months, with maintenance requests that had been filed but not prioritized. The camera coverage had blind spots that had never been addressed. The radio communication system between guards had outdated equipment that sometimes failed. Staff-to-guard ratios were inadequate for the size of the palace grounds during family residence periods. A complete overhaul was ordered. Every lock was replaced with new, tamper-proof systems that automatically alerted security if they were opened. Additional cameras were installed, eliminating all blind spots. Every guard was equipped with new digital radios with built-in GPS tracking. A sophisticated motion detection system was added to the gardens, capable of alerting security if anyone approached restricted areas or boundary walls. The financial cost ran into hundreds of thousands of pounds. The palace budget was strained, but William insisted the improvements were non-negotiable. "Money doesn't matter if it keeps my children safe," he told the palace treasurer. "Whatever needs to be spent, spend it." The treasurer, who had served the royal family for decades, had never seen the prince so adamant about anything. Training protocols for security staff were completely revised. New guards underwent twice as much training as before, with specific scenarios about managing multiple simultaneous demands without compromising their primary duty. Senior officers conducted surprise drills, testing response times and decision-making under pressure. Richardson oversaw every aspect of the new training program. Determined to create a security system that was virtually foolproof, the construction worker who had kept the young prince safe, Patricia Morris, received a personal invitation to visit Kensington Palace. William and Catherine wanted to thank her properly, away from media attention. Patricia arrived nervous and overwhelmed, dressed in her best clothes. The princess greeted her warmly, taking both her hands. "You showed kindness to our son when he was lost and scared. You'll always have our gratitude." They spent an hour talking over tea, with Patricia telling stories about her own grandchildren, making William and Catherine laugh. The young prince, who had been told to thank the nice lady from the construction site, gave Patricia a drawing he had made, showing her giving him a biscuit. Patricia framed it and hung it in her living room, where it would become one of her most treasured possessions. The palace never publicly released details about what had happened that day. The official record simply noted a security review and protocol update that took place in spring. But within law enforcement and security circles, the incident became a case study. Lectures at police training colleges used it as an example of how seemingly small failures could cascade into major incidents. The 9 minutes when the young prince was missing became a cautionary tale about the importance of rigorous adherence to security protocols. For William, the incident forced a deeper reckoning with his role as both a father and a future king. He had always tried to be hands-on with his children, resisting the traditional royal approach of delegating parenting to nannies and staff. He wanted to be present, involved, creating memories with his kids. But the incident had shown him that his children's lives would always be more complicated than those of ordinary families. He couldn't treat security as someone else's responsibility while he focused on being a fun dad. He and Catherine had long conversations about how to move forward. They agreed they wouldn't retreat into paranoia or overprotection. Their children would still have outdoor playtime, still explore and learn and grow. But both parents would be more present, more watchful. They would trust security, but verify. They would appreciate the protocols that kept their families safe, rather than seeing them as inconveniences. The young prince, as children do, moved on quickly from his adventure. Within days, he was back to normal play, his brief time as a missing child already fading in his memory. He would grow up not fully remembering the day his father's world stopped. The day 9 minutes felt like an eternity, the day a construction worker became an unlikely hero. But the incident would shape how his parents raised him, forming every decision about his security and freedom for years to come. 6 months later, at a private dinner, Catherine mentioned the incident to a trusted friend. "For 9 minutes, I didn't know if my son was alive or dead. For 9 minutes, I wasn't there to protect him. It changed me. It changed William. We'll never take safety for granted again," her friend nodded sympathetically, understanding that some fears never completely leave, even after the danger is past. William occasionally ran into Richardson in the palace corridors. The relationship between them had evolved. There was still professional respect, but also a shared understanding of what they had been through together. They both carried the weight of that day, the knowledge of how close things had come to disaster. Richardson had kept his promise. The security systems he implemented were the most comprehensive in royal history. Nothing like that day would ever happen again on his watch. Officer Marcus Cole eventually became a detective in the Metropolitan Police Fraud Division. He never forgot the lesson he learned that spring day. He went on to have a successful career, and he became known for his meticulous attention to procedure and detail. He never applied to return to royal protection. The memory of his failure stayed with him. It's a permanent reminder that some mistakes carry consequences too serious to risk repeating. Years later, when the young prince was older and being taught about security protocols, William told him the full story of that day. The boy, now a teenager, was shocked. "I remember eating a biscuit, but I didn't know everyone was so worried." "I didn't know you were scared, Dad?" Liam smiled sadly. "I was terrified. The most scared I've ever been. But you were safe in the end, and that's what matters. I'm telling you this story so you understand why security is important. Why we have rules and protocols. It's not to control you. It's to keep you safe." The incident had lasting effects on royal security across all residences. Windsor Castle, Buckingham Palace, and every royal property underwent similar reviews and upgrades. The other members of the royal family were briefed on what had happened and what changes were being implemented. Everyone understood that the protocols were written in near tragedy, that they existed because of 9 minutes when a child was missing and the future of the monarchy felt desperately uncertain. Patricia Morris, the construction worker who had kept the boy safe, became something of a minor celebrity in her own neighborhood after people learned she had helped the royal family. She deflected the attention, insisting she had only done what anyone would do. But privately, she told her family that those few minutes with the lost little prince had been the most important of her life. "I gave him a biscuit and told him everything would be okay. That's all I did." But apparently that mattered. For William and Catherine, the incident became a private touchstone in their marriage. When they disagreed about parenting decisions, when they worried about giving their children too much freedom or too little, they would reference that day. It was shorthand for all their fears, all their responsibilities, all the unique pressures of raising children in the public eye. That day reminded them to appreciate every normal moment, every safe return home, every peaceful bedtime. The eastern gate, where everything had gone wrong, was eventually sealed permanently. A new gate was installed in a different location, with multiple redundant security systems and constant video monitoring. The old gate became just another section of wall, indistinguishable from the rest of the palace boundary. But William could never walk past it without remembering, without feeling that clutch of fear in his chest, without thinking, "This is where I almost lost everything." On the anniversary of the incident, William made it a private tradition to spend extra time with his son. They would do something the boy enjoyed, something normal and fun. They would make memories that had nothing to do with security failures, or missing children, or panicked searches. They would just be a father and son, enjoying time together. It was William's way of reclaiming that day, of transforming it from a date of fear into a date of appreciation for what they still had. The story of that spring afternoon became one of those family experiences that reshaped everyone who lived through it. It wasn't the kind of story that got told at official functions or included in authorized biographies. It was too raw, too frightening, too revealing of the vulnerability beneath the royal facade. But within the family, within the security detail, within the small circle of people who knew what had really happened, it remained vivid and powerful. Sometimes late at night when the palace was quiet, William would think about all the things that could have gone differently. If the construction worker hadn't been kind, if his son had wandered into traffic instead of a construction site, if someone with bad intentions had seen an unattended royal child, the alternative scenarios haunted him, reminding him how fragile safety could be, how quickly everything could change. But he also thought about what had gone right. A guard who, despite his mistake, had helped search with dedication. A protection officer who had coordinated an effective response despite his guilt and fear. Police who had locked down an area within minutes. A postman who remembered seeing a child. A construction worker who gave comfort to a scared little boy. All of these people had played their part in bringing his son home safely. In the end, the story of Where's the Prince became a story about systems failing and humans succeeding. It was about protocols that weren't followed and instincts that were. It was about 9 minutes that felt like forever and a lifetime of lessons learned in an afternoon. Most of all, it was about a father's love and fear, about the terrible responsibility of keeping children safe in a world that was both wondrous and dangerous. The young prince had wanted to see a digger. That simple childhood curiosity had nearly broken everyone who loved him. But he had come home safe, and that was the only part of the story that truly mattered.